بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين، سيما بقية الله روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء. قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وجاءت سكرة الموت بالحق. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. مؤمنين ومؤمنات, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once again we offer our condolences to the family of Marhum Sayyid Abdul Rabba Nuruddin, and I request all to once again recite Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him and all the marhumin from our family members and our community members, grant them all abundance of his mercy, and grant us the opportunity to be dutiful to them, barreen, after their departure. One thing is to be dutiful to mu'mineen and mu'minat, our parents and ancestors in this life or during their life, and another is to continue to be dutiful after their departure. In the hadith we are told that someone could be bar during the life of his parents, and after their departure he may become and may be written amongst those who are not bar or dutiful, who are neglectful on the other hand. And some are written neglectful or aaq during their life, but after their departure they may be recorded as barreen or dutiful, and that is based on whether or not they continue to do the right thing, or they start in some cases to do the right thing by their parents and their ancestors, and inshallah we are amongst those. And if you ask me what are our duties towards them after their departure, one is to seek forgiveness for them. Another is to give charity on their behalf. Another one is to help and connect with those whom they would want to help and connect with. In some cases, I've given examples to mu'mineen and mu'minat, in some cases siblings are not doing very well with one another, and that hurts the parents. Next thing is a parent, a father, a mother departs this world, and those siblings decide to mend their relationships and connect with one another for the sake of the marhum or marhuma. That actually changes them from aaq to bar. And on the contrary, God forbid, and we seek refuge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from such a state where they're doing well and connecting during the life of their parents, and once the parents depart, there's hardly any connection, they hardly know each other or visit each other and so on, and that could be written amongst the opposite, wal-'iyadhu billah. Inshallah we're amongst the dutiful ones. Back to our discussion which we started a few weeks ago on the stations of the hereafter or Manazil al-Akhirah, which I based it on the book of the late Allama and Muhaddith Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi, in which he put together some stations of the journey that is inevitable. No one can escape, based on obviously ayat and riwayat, and also put together some ammunition, some provision for each of those journeys, or each station, or each obstacle, if you want, each station or each difficulty that we may face in the journey of death and what comes after death. The akhirah, man mata faqad qamat qiyamatuh. The start of, in fact, the journey is sakaratul maut, when they come, which is truth. And that is what everybody, typically everyone in this world, escapes. Minhu tahid, Quran says. You were avoiding. Most of us avoid death. We avoid talking about it, and we don't want to even allow our minds to think that I could be next. When it's true, it is the reality. Death knows no age, no race, no boundaries. It is not based on what kind of a building you're living in. The famous hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he says, تذل الأمور للمقادير حتى يكون الحتف في التدبير. Things are so subdued and submit to destiny that one plans for his own death. He plans, he doesn't know that him or her planning to avoid death. If death is the destiny in that situation, it comes through his own planning. Which that famous translation into the English language, which is suggested to be the French philosopher's statement, when it's not. He says one often meets his destiny on a path he takes to avoid it. It is actually the translation of the hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam. In any case, death is inevitable, and we don't know when it comes. And when sakaratul maut, that I mentioned last week, sakaratul maut come, it is not based on how long it takes one to die from the time they're bedridden or they're sick in the hospital bed or they're experiencing the difficulties, maradul maut as we say. It is not based on that. Sakaratul maut for the one who is departing in a spiritual sense is experienced by everybody, whether they're shot and die on the spot, or they have a heart attack and die on the spot, or they lay on a hospital bed and die in 1 or 2 years. Regardless, when it comes to sakaratul maut, it's the same thing. It is when they're experiencing the world in between, if you want. On the one hand, some of their organs, some of their senses are still capable of basically collecting information of this world and somehow understanding some of it. It's called sakra because they're not completely aware. They are aware but not completely aware. They're like someone who is basically intoxicated, someone who is hit on the head, kind of dizzy, doesn't realize what's going on completely. They see, they hear, but they're somewhere else. This is in fact sakaratul maut. And why are they somewhere else? Because they are starting to see the world beyond. Now it is the time where they're experiencing and seeing the world beyond. I shared with mu'mineen and mu'minat, there are some who went close to that, and often they call that near-death experience. And there are documentaries about it, some TV shows about it. You can read books about it. There are many confirmed incidents where they cannot be lying. about the experiences that they experienced and what they went through, and the out-of-body experience where they pretty much they were watching their own body and watching the physicians or doctors operating and all, you know, people around them and so on. So many stories, it's beyond, it's in Arabic we could say بلغ حد التواتر. It is basically, and when it comes to experimental science, many theories become facts in science based on the three, you know, the number three has some magic, you know, three experiences that confirm the same results become kind of you know, as a proof that this is a fact. This is no longer a coincidence in science. And we have many more than three when it comes to this near-death experience that confirms that this is something, there is something beyond this life, there is something beyond this world, and what these people see and share is definitely truth. When that Sakratul Maut comes, I'm not speaking about those who have near-death experience and come back. Those who are departing, those who are really departing, marhumin, we're gathered remembering this marhum, and pretty much every few days or few weeks we have somebody who departs from our, you know, gatherings, from some close relatives, far relatives, family, friends. All of these, by the way, are reminders. You know, we are told in the hadith that when somebody tells Malakul Maut, give me time, you haven't given me any reminders or any warnings, Malakul Maut says, all these people who died before you were not enough warnings, that you witnessed time after time. You were, nowadays we receive emails, yes? Most of you receive those emails. You're a member of some organizational, okay, an email pops up or a message pops up or whatever in social media, you get the email, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You know, for Muslims we understand this. You know, we belong to God and we return to Him. We surely return to Him. And often they put that immediately when you see that, you know that somebody has departed. You know, when you see that as the beginning of any message, that itself is a reminder and that itself is a warning. Malakul Maut is warning you indirectly, telling you that, you know, just like this person was taken, you could be next. And we don't know, the death knows no age, because some of you may remember a few months ago, we were in the cemetery burying a boy, a young boy, 5-year-old or so boy. 2-year-old? Subhanallah, yeah. I had the age perhaps based on the characteristics. Nonetheless, a couple of year old boy we were at the cemetery burying. And another time we were burying a 30-some-year-old young man, a member of the community, son of the prominent or frequently visiting members of the community. This is it. So many at that young age, some older, it doesn't know any age, it comes. Those are the warnings. Malakul Maut gave us the warnings. And so that time comes, Sakratul Maut comes, and the experience starts. Now what happens, this is what we can control. What we could not control, some of you may remember I shared this, what we could not control, none of us had control over, is where we are born. In what environment, what we experience. Some of you, I was born in a kind of a war zone. So bombs were going on. Hospitals were not available. So it was, they had makeshift hospital in a high school. And that's my time. Some were born in, I guess, rich families. Some were born in poor families. Some were born in very religious families. Some were born in, more secular or even atheist families, Christian families. We have a member who's frequently with us who was born in a Christian family. So where we were born, we had absolutely no control over. What environment, what weather, what parents, none of us had any control over that when we come into this world. However, there's a very beautiful poem that says that, O son of Adam, it's in Arabic, you came to this world crying. When a baby is born, they're crying. And yet, everybody around you was smiling and laughing. So do your best. This is where we have control over. When we come, we have absolutely no control. What we have control over is when we depart. The poem says, do your best that when you come to depart this world, you are the one laughing or smiling while others around you are in grief and crying. Them crying, in fact, is a sign that you are missed, you are loved. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, live with people in a way that when you depart from them, temporarily they miss you. And when you die and depart from them eternally in terms of this world, they cry over you. Live with people in this way. Make them feel that gap when you're not around. When you are out, make them feel that those missing and loving emotions. And when you're about to depart this world, or when you depart this world, they are sincerely sad and crying and in grief. This is how we should live our lives. In fact, that brings me to one of the things that would make the time of death easy. We spoke about sakaratul maut, we spoke about how difficulties, confusion, things that could make it extremely difficult. Last week, if you remember, we mentioned some of the things that could make sakaratul maut extremely difficult. On the other hand, what has the ability to make sakaratul maut, or the time of death, easy? What are they? One of them is being good with people. We just mentioned that live with them in a way that they love your presence. They miss you when you're not around, and they cry when you're departing. There is a hadith that says, feeding people sweets. People like sweets, yeah? They often say, al-mu'minun halawiyun. They like sweets, generally. Feeding people sweets. In other words, feeding people what people like. Okay? People like sweets. Giving them something that they like, they enjoy, makes one not taste the bitterness of the time of death. The hadith says. You give them halawa, and that relieves you from mararatu sakarat al-maut. You will not experience the bitterness at the time of death. That is one example. Another example, it says, kiswatu al-mu'min, giving clothing to somebody who doesn't have it. Helping somebody who doesn't have the means to buy clothes, helping them buy them clothes or give them the means to buy clothes, doing that for them, whether you buy the cheaper one. Now this is the old days. Nowadays it's a little different, I'll explain. In the old days, the cheaper one was the clothing of summer, because it has less fabric, less material, so it was cheaper. And the winter one was obviously more material, so more expensive. And therefore the hadith says whether you give them the clothing of shita or sayf, winter or summer, either way, you still protect yourself from some of the difficulties of sakaratul maut. Now, why did I say the old day versus the new, modern day? In our modern day, they give you a T-shirt and they put a brand on it, and it's more expensive than the most thick wool jackets, because it's not about the material and how much material is there. They fool us with some names and brand names and some perhaps calligraphy on it. A couple of letters there, and it becomes more expensive than the bigger or the bulkier items, winter items, and so on. Nonetheless, the important thing to actually pay attention to is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so kind, so merciful, almost like looking for an excuse to relieve us from any kind of difficulty, and sent prophets and imams to guide us, to relieve us from our own regrets and difficulties of the journey after we see the reality of things. And therefore, the simple act of getting someone some clothing would relieve you from difficulties. The simple act of feeding somebody some sweet things would relieve us from some of the difficulties of the sakaratul maut. Another one is recitation of some du'as and some ayat of the Holy Quran. One of them is at the time of ihtidar, when one is unwell. If one doesn't know, one may ask, okay, I don't know, when is it going to come? Therefore, recite this dua not just then, recite it as frequent as you can, once a week if you want, with that intention that if death comes, you have an easier death. This dua is reconfirmation of our beliefs, okay, our aqidah or aqa'id, our iman, dua al-adila. Because it protects, according to the hadith, it protects one from adila عند الموت, from that the possibility of changing one's faith at the time of death. And it has happened, unfortunately, to some that right at the moment they were okay in terms of their aqidah, believing in God and hereafter, believing in the messenger and all of these things. Out of a sudden death comes and they're not prepared for it. They're not prepared, they're not ready to leave, not just not prepared to meet their Lord and be in Akhirah, they're not ready to part with all the things that they were working hard for in this dunya. To the point that somebody shared with me first-hand experience. They witnessed a loved one right in front of their eyes as they were departing, وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, saying things like, if God, or if, something like, if God exists, this is not possible. This is what I'm facing. Why? Because they wanted to witness their son or daughter's marriage, and it was a few weeks before that, and out of a sudden a disease comes along and they're told that this is it, they cannot make it to that point, and they were praying and praying. Out of a sudden they thought where is this merciful God that I can't even witness my son's or my daughter's wedding? And they started questioning the whole thing. وَالْعَيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. We seek refuge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from such a turn at the end of the road, which is called adila, and we pray and hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us from that. What can we do to avoid that? Again, recite this dua. Reciting not just a verbal, and again I have to remind mu'mineen and mu'minat, any dua, it's not just to utter words like up and sesame. I'm sorry to say that on the minbar. Some people think dua or Quran or some of the adhkar that we have, they work like this magical thing that you say it regardless of whether or not you mean it. In today's world, you are speaking with your friend and out of a sudden your phone says, I can't understand, your command, or what did you want me to do, or why? Because the phone heard something that sounded, the voice control things, sounded like you're trying to give a command. We think that God is like a robot, wal-'iyadu billah, that whether or not we mean what we say or we know what we say, as long as you say these things, it will have its effect. It does not have its effect unless we mean it. We understand it and we mean it. When we recite a dua, we're asking God. When I shared with mu'mineen and mu'minat, when Imam Ali alayhi salam taught Kumail, dua Kumail, that we know it as dua Kumail, he said to him, write it down and wad'u bihi, not iqra'hu. This is very different. He says, write it down, sit down, write what I'm teaching you, and call upon God through this dua. Wad'u bihi, on these times, every Thursday night and on the eve of the 15th of Sha'ban. So the Imam is not telling him to read it. Unfortunately, we think we have to read it. It doesn't matter, we just have to do a checklist, I read it. No, call God through it. Talk to God through it. So the al-adila, for example, which has to do with reconfirming our faith, it is not a matter of saying it verbally. I just utter a few words and this is it, it works. No, it will work and it has its effects if I understand it, comprehend it, I reflect on it, I mean what I say when I say it. I'm talking to God through this dua. This is another one. Surah Al-Zilzila, repeatedly reciting this surah, frequently recite Surah Al-Zilzila, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. Another one is Surah Yasin and As-Saffat. As-Saffat is right after Surah Yasin. Yasin, which is often recited by mu'mineen and mu'minat. If you want to complete it, recite Surah As-Saffat after it. Was-Saffat Saffat to the rest of the surah. A very, very meaningful, powerful surah. Again, reciting those surahs with reflection. These are the powers that will, in fact, deal with shaitan and nafs at any time that Malakul Maut comes. We are ready and we have all the ammunition, all the strength and power to deal with shayateen and to deal with our whims and desires, so that no wedding of children, no property that I was going to close on, no insurance that I'm going to lose or win, or what's going to happen to this fund and that fund, none of that would matter to us. When we recite these ayat and we recite these supplications properly, none of those things would matter to us. However, tonight I wanted us to focus on not all of it, on one aspect, which is again how we are with people. If we want easy sakaratul maut, ultimately it is about how we are with people. If we are fair, if we are just, if we are kind, if we are forgiving, if we are loving, if we have all these beautiful attributes with people, that itself would alleviate any difficulty at the time of death. That itself suffices. You don't need any more than that. In fact, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was in Tawaf, and a friend or a companion was with him. As they were doing the Tawaf, the companion, somebody was calling this companion. So he ignored that person. The Imam asked him, why are you ignoring him? He said, I know he needs me for some help and I'm doing Tawaf with you. So not only doing Tawaf around the Kaaba, circumambulating around the Kaaba, but also doing it with the Imam of his time. Imagine doing Tawaf with the Imam of the time. Yet the Imam says to him, go and help him, because helping him has way more rewards. Way, not just, it has way more rewards than your tawaf with the Imam of your time around the Kaaba. Helping that person has multiples of rewards more than simply doing your tawaf. We often get the equation wrong. If we are good, time of death would be good. If we're good with people, if we're kind and merciful, and we have no accounts against us. Okay, we haven't hurt people and not apologized. We haven't harmed people. You know, often they say he can't harm an ant. That's saying. That kind of person, that when they're departing, everybody is praying for them. Nobody has any kind of ill feelings. Rather, everybody has positive emotions and thinking, what a shame, it is a loss, and at the same time praying for their easy journey. That definitely would make our departure and sakarat al-maut easier. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our ending, the good ending, husnul aqibah, make us depart easily, grant us mercy and grant all the mu'mineen and mu'minat from our family members and our ancestors, especially the marhum that we gathered for Sayyid Abdul Rida Nuruddin, and all the marhumeen, grant them all abundance of His mercy with the rewards of Al-Fatiha ma'as-salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Now, the rewards that we were talking about helping people, or what about doing, helping the mosque in cleaning, regular activities, for the maintenance of the mosque? Does it apply to that?
Ahsan. That is a different level altogether. So the question, just to reiterate the question, we spoke about helping people, and Sayyid's question is, what about helping the masjid, the mosque, the house of God, cleaning, maintaining the house of God? What about that? That in fact has a whole different level, which is what the ayah says, إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ. Umran is not building. Some people, when they read this ayah, they think it's about building. Umran is through keeping alive. Amir is something that is kept alive. A city that is Amira, it is basically well maintained. It is, the streets are lit up, the streets are maintained. That is the Amir. Versus a place that is kharab. Khariba, as we read in the history or in the Arabic language. So we have the umran, meaning to maintain, to keep up, to clean and maintain and keep up. That the description given to those who maintain the house of God or the houses of God in this world in the Holy Quran is an amazing description. Man amana billahi wal yawmil akhir, to the rest of the ayah. And that in fact is a blessing from God that not many people have that blessing. I know, sometimes it's frustrating when you watch people or you see that very rarely people feel the urge to help and assist. Some of those who have that urge and feel the need to help and assist are blessed, and not everybody has that kind of blessings. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that more and more people are guided and blessed to be able to achieve that level. Because that's not a level of helping one person, that is helping people in general. Because sometimes some people think that you can only help people by feeding them, or you can only help people by giving them clothes. But what about helping people by guiding them or facilitating a medium to guide the people? That is the real revival. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran, He says that the messenger invited you to what gives you life. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم. O you who believe, respond to the call of your Lord and the messenger when they invite you to what gives you life, what revives you. In other words, we have the physical life we're living. The Quran is addressing the living people, physically living. But they invite us to the real life, the spiritual life, which is the real life of a human being. These places, masajid and the houses of worship, facilitate reviving humanity, reviving insaniya, reviving a human being on a spiritual level, and therefore they're the best help to people, the highest level of helping people, and whoever has the blessings of doing that, فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. There's a lot of good for them in that. May God bless those who have that opportunity and tawfiq, and give that tawfiq to us and to others as well, inshallah. Any other questions? Inshallah, we'll once again let us remember all the marhumin with al-Fatiha ma'a salat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.